From the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Nebraska Farmcast. I'm Ryan Evans. Looking ahead from now in the late summer of 2024, the agricultural landscape faces a mix of challenges and uncertainties. Lower commodity prices, rising production costs, and tighter margins are creating a difficult environment for producers across the country. This financial pressure is reminiscent of the hurdles faced by the ag sector a decade ago, but today's high interest rate climate adds another layer of complexity. That's according to Dr. Brad Lubin, Associate Professor and Extension Policy Specialist here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He's written about it in his policy report column for Nebraska Farmer Magazine's September print issue, and he's joining me now to explore some of these risks that are facing producers and to discuss some tools and strategies available to help navigate those challenges. So good to be with you again, Brad.
Good to be with you, Ryan.
How do the lower prices and these higher production costs that we're seeing, and you mentioned in the column, compare to challenges that were faced a decade ago by ag producers?
Right.
And then are the risks today potentially more severe?
It's an interesting economic climate. We've had sharp downturns in farm income nationally in 2023, and we have projections for even sharper downturns in 2024. But those come off of record high farm income levels in 2022. That kind of parallels what happened back in 2011 and 2013 when farm income peaked sort of around the commodity boom and then some drought-induced high prices. And we ended up with record farm incomes before we really started falling back in 2024 and the following years. So there are some parallels to a decade ago where we have some sharp declines from what had been record farm income levels and a function of lower commodity prices, higher higher input costs, and this time a different interest rate environment that challenges producers in terms of how they financially manage the downturn.
And then production risk is always a concern for crop producers, obviously. So especially with this year's varying weather conditions, what strategies are you seeing producers using to manage these risks related to weather? And how effective do you think crop insurance in particular has been in managing that impact?
Well, production risk, you bet, is always an important consideration for producers. Maybe the easiest one to identify and say, well, that's a risk we have to be able to manage. And if we ask producers what's important, how do they manage risk? Always in the short run, the fundamental tool we're talking about is how does insurance work? Crop insurance and now livestock insurance products as well, predominantly for price on the other side. But fundamentally, crop insurance tools matter substantially here. It's worth noting, however, that insurance is the tool you use to manage risk in the short run. And remember, all of our insurance products effectively provide production risk protection and inherently some price risk protection for the current year. They don't protect us from long-run changes in costs or long-run changes in prices or long-run changes in weather patterns. And so not only making insurance decisions about the current year, but thinking about how we might have to adapt our operations. What enterprise choices do we make? Which crop and livestock mixes might we have? But how do we adapt over the longer run? That's how we're going to have to manage production risk going forward.
Yeah, and you discuss the importance of federal programs like the agriculture risk coverage and price loss coverage programs in managing market risk. So how are producers leveraging ARC and PLC programs right now in conjunction with other strategies?
Yeah, it's first recognizing that those programs really sort of work in concert with other things. We've talked about the ARC and PLC programs, the farm program, commodity programs, and they provide price or revenue protection for producers. And they do so by protecting current year results against in the case of ARC, a moving average revenue target or a moving average revenue guarantee. And in the case of price, against now actually a moving average price guarantee with a minimum built into the equation. But fundamentally, play all that out. ARC and PLC provide producers some revenue and price protection against longer run declines in prices. The crop insurance tools kick in and offer that risk protection for the current year. And so if you back up and think, well, how did crop insurance play out? Well, compare for crops the base price against current price projections, and there's an awful lot of protection that was built into the base price in crop insurance this year. So it's providing both production protection and some protection from the current drop in prices. The farm program similarly provides some longer run protection in the sense of protecting this year's prices or revenue losses against a moving average. Both of them still really don't offer perfect protection against the long run. There's still the need on both the price side and the production side to manage for the long run.
And right now, financial risk, the environment is creating, shrinking margins a lot of places, and higher interest rates are upon us still. So what advice would you give to producers to ensure that they can maintain financial stability during such challenging times?
Yeah. Typically when we see such a sharp downturn, the first thing that gets mentioned is we're talking about producers working through, burning through cash flow. Cash flow's falling. We're burning through working capital. We're tapping into our financial position. Well, we generally across the ag sector have had very strong financial positions, and the debt to asset ratio, for example, and the aggregate as a whole is really low. We have quite a bit of financial strength for borrowers, for that segment of the population that is borrowing capital. That financial position is a little more challenging. And for all of them, if you're burning through cash, eventually you're looking at, do I need to finance something or refinance something? And that refinancing decision today is at substantially higher interest rates than the last time we went through this a decade ago. A decade ago, if we were burning through cash, it was easy to say, well, you can always refinance. You can stretch out some current debt into term debt. You can refinance your term debt, and you can do so at what were nearly record low interest rates. That's not what we have today. And so not only the cost of financing and the cost of refinancing, but also some of the financial pressure from doing so is a much more difficult decision today than it was a decade ago.
And how about with risk as far as in the legal arena and the policy arena with, recent Supreme Court rulings, the pending Farm Bill? How do you see these risks impacting producers, and is there anything they can be doing to prepare for potential changes?
Yeah, I think on the legal side, we think of contract risk and policy risk, and I've written in several places about the fact that policy itself is somewhat of a risk because there's so much uncertainty. We obviously have uncertainty right now about a farm bill and whether we might get one done or whether we might yet face another extension. But we're talking about an uncertain future as to what does the farm bill look like and what does the safety net look like. That creates challenges for producers thinking about how to manage risk in the coming year. We also then have similar risks about other policies. And so producers are always faced with the reality of we have to manage for today's environment. We also have to position our operation to either be ready for opportunities that might come in the future or be ready for shocks or challenges that might come in the future. So you're almost managing for the risk that doesn't yet exist because the possibility is there that in the legal framework, the policy framework, we might have to address that soon enough.
And then lastly, you write about human risk, and it can often be overlooked, yet you highlight how critical it can be, that the importance of considering human risk. So can you expand on how ag producers can better manage labor, communication, personal well-being to ensure the long-term success?
Yeah, I note that it's overlooked in the sense it's easy to look at the markets every day or to look at the field and think about production every day. And the financial questions are certainly in front of us now almost every day too. You can think about those decisions that happen every single day, and then you get to the people side and you say, well, the people resources are what I do every day. I've got tasks to do. I've got chores to do. I've got fires to put out, right? That's the kind of thing that just consumes us day to day. And yet we don't forget about the human resource is perhaps the most valuable asset we have on the operation. And it is fundamentally why the operation exists. It's the people. So if you don't figure out not only how to manage today's chores and tasks, but also how to manage the people involved in that operation, that can be the downfall of the entire operation, regardless of its financial position or its productivity and its competitive success. If you can't manage the people, ultimately you don't have much of an operation to work with. That's hired personnel. So the traditional personnel management, job descriptions, all the tools you might think of about how to better manage people, how to find them, how to train them, how to retain them, how to motivate them. Those are all important elements of managing people. That's also true if those people aren't hired, if they're your family. And amongst other things, you generally can't fire your family. So you're dealing with, how do I work with family communications? And then there's one more element of this too yet that shows up there in the human risk side. It's ultimately the transition of the operation, retirement planning, succession planning, farm transition, et cetera. Almost nobody expects to die in the next year. But we all have in that 5 to 10 year window the reality that, hey, we've got to think about how to transition this operation. So it's often the things on the human risk side that they get overlooked on the day-to-day because they're not tasks that have to be done today with a deadline, or they're bigger strategic questions that still get overlooked year to year because that may not happen this year, but they're critical to ultimately the success of the operation, the viability, the future path, and that includes personal well-being. As we go through some financial challenges here, we note that personal stress and family stress and communications all suffer, and managing that and recognizing that and admitting that is an important part of dealing with the risks that we face.
Absolutely. And it seems like a good time to note that us here at the Center for Ag Profitability and Nebraska Extension, we've been working hard at developing a lot of resources and education in these areas to address concerns about stress for agricultural producers. And here at the Center for Ag Profitability, what you were just talking about, managing family members, we would encourage listeners to go find, there's a webinar recording from August 29th of this year, talking all about managing family members on the farm. There's one from August 22nd as well with similar coverage and topics in there, and going through all those issues of how you can best manage the farm, working with families so that you can ensure a hopefully successful future. But, all of these risks you've been talking about today are so prevalent, and we appreciate your time elaborating on them. And we encourage, again, people to check out your article in the September print issue of Nebraska Farmer Magazine for more on managing risk in risky times. So Dr. Brad Lubin, again, is an extension policy specialist with the Center for Ag Profitability here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Thanks, Brad.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Nebraska Farmcast is a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the latest research-based information and education resources to manage your farm or ranch operation, visit our website at cap.unl.edu. That's cap.unl.edu.